Hello, we can hear you very clearly.
Oh, great, great. Before I introduce you to our moderator, the wonderful Tom Needham, may I ask where you are located? Moses, where are you now?
I'm right now in California, in Los Angeles, yeah.
Okay, and Christopher?
So I'm in London.
Oh, you're in London.
It's lovely and early in the morning.
Okay, right. So you're the one that got the short end of the stick.
Yeah, no, that's all right. That's okay.
Okay. All right, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator. I'd like you to introduce you to Tom Needham. And he's going to start out the Q&A, and then hopefully we'll have some questions from the audience.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for doing this. And I love the film, and I think everyone here did just as much as I did.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful to be here, and thank you all for coming to watch it.
Yeah,
Thanks, Tom. Thank you. Yeah.
So guys, tell me a little bit how the two of you first got involved in making this story, why you wanted to tell Bobby Wine's incredible tale.
Shall I start, Moses, or do you want to start?
Yes, no, you start.
So I grew up in Uganda, and my father was born in Uganda as well. And I met Bobby at the beginning of 2017. And I was completely just blown away by them. When they told me it was Bobby and Barbie, and when they told me their story, I was just incredibly impressed. And I just thought that it was a story that needed to be told. Bobby at the time was a very successful musician. His life was flying high. He had Barbie, who's this wonderful, beautiful, strong woman. He had great children, and everything was going very well for him. He had just gone into politics, and he'd started, as you see in the film, he'd started using his music to talk about the corruption and the misgovernment in Uganda. And they were clearly very special people. So I suggested to them that we make a film about them. And in typical Bobby and Barbie fashion, they said, no problem. You can just be with us as much as you like. And then I was in Uganda, and I was introduced to Moses, and we started working together. And it turned out to be a very successful partnership between the two of us. And yeah, that's how it started.
You want to add anything to that, Moses?
Yes, please. Tom, it's been a blessing being part of this. And that morning I met Chris at a hotel in downtown Kampala. I told him, Chris, thank you for making this film, and setting out to make this film, because at the time there was a big division in politics, and the youth were really alienated from participation. And Bobby's message was for everybody to get involved and to take charge of leadership and have their voice represented in Parliament. So when Chris reached out, it was a great, I just saw a beautiful film and a great idea. So yeah, and Bobby was just, like Chris said, had just crossed into politics as, he was a musician, but he wasn't the normal, it wasn't the normal politics. It was, he calls it here the rubber dub style, unconventional politics. He doesn't want to be referred to as a politician at all, but pro people and honest, down to earth. Yeah, so it was just a great meeting, and yeah, it's been a great journey. We've gone on to become great friends with Chris, and it's been a great journey making this film. Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about your partnership and like who did what on the film?
Yeah, I mean, we did. I mean, Moses, we had various people shooting, and Moses shot. He was very much in the thick of it many times. And then we had various people filming. I mean, we were filming over the course of 5 years.
Yeah.
But Moses was really, really in the thick of it. And then we spent, I spent 2 years, over 2 years in the edit suite. We ended up with thousands, I think it was 4,000 hours of footage. And we had a lot of archive footage. We had, and the trick really, the question was what story we wanted to tell, because there were so many different stories. And when you try and condense 4,000 hours of footage into under 2 hours, there's so many routes you can go down. And I think, and we had a very, very good editor, and we sort of started out, and there was a lot more violence in the film. We really, while filming, we witnessed some pretty horrific things. And we had various different cuts, and the early cuts had a lot more violence in them. But what we decided to do eventually, we found the most powerful way of showing the story was really getting very close to Bobby and Barbie and showing the story through their eyes. And you sort of feel the pain when you know people better. So we restricted the amount of characters in the film, even though we could have had a lot more people in it, but we tried to restrict it to people, get to know them and tell the story very much through them. The other thing which we wanted to do pretty early on when we started thinking about how the story would play out was to use the music, because Bobby uses the music to communicate to people. And we wanted to use Bobby's music to tell the story. And that's why we ended up putting the lyrics on there. And, you know, there's a lot of different music we could have used, but we were quite sort of ended up being quite careful and picking stuff which we felt was relevant. And it's just, and I think in the end it works. You know, it's such a process. But by the end of it, we were pretty comfortable.
You mentioned the violence, and you could have shown a lot more of it. It seems like there was a lot in it. It sounds like it was extremely dangerous. And I was wondering, Moses, if you can give us a little sense of what it was like to be there and to be in some of these situations, which just seemed frightening at times.
So just in addition to your previous question, how it was working together, that this film has been 5 years in the making. It was constant. I mean, it changed a lot, like Chris explained. It went from us thinking we could make a series to thinking we would make, what, Chris, was it 3 films or 2 films?
Yeah, it was, we actually kind of at one point we thought we were going to make 2 films.
Yeah, and then ending up with 1 film, and you know, so there's tons and tons and tons of footage. There's many different films that, you know, we could cut, but I tell you, I throughout the making of the film, it took, I think I spoke to Chris more than I spoke to my wife, because we were on the phone most of the time, and you know, dreaming and thinking the film and Bobby and the revolution happening in Uganda. It was a great working journey and relationship, and we worked with, as you see in the film, 2 other cinematographers, Michele Sibiloni and Sam Benstead, great cinematographers. Yeah, but it was really getting close and personal with Bobby and Barbie, like Chris said, what really mattered at the end, and that really put our story close to the heart. But also, it was a moment in time in Uganda's history that we were trying to capture. And I believe again, it's a blessing to have been there and present to do that. You know, it's a time when people were dreaming of change. Of course, they've dreamt for a very long time of change, but it looked like it was possible. Bobby's brevity and you know, they've gone to, I would say, you know, extremes of honesty and uncompromising, and you know, because there was people that were part of the movement that were, you know, paid off by the regime to turn against you know, the Bobby and the team. So it's against all odds that they got to where they did, and you know, in the end they win. The election is won, but they're not declared. And yeah, but we were really blessed to be there.
Yeah, I just think one thing which was quite funny, when we sort of showed Bobby the cut, pretty much the final cut, he said, "You've made them look so good." And we were like, what? You know, they look so bad, you know. And he said, "Oh, you just haven't shown any violence." And I think just the level of what those guys went through. I mean, as you see in the film, you know, a large proportion of Bobby's team were locked up for months and they suffered a great deal. And of course, Bobby was tortured and imprisoned. And for them, you know, the amount of abuse and the amount of horror that they went through, you know, they feel we hadn't shown as much as could have been shown, but it felt like the right way of doing it.
Did either of you have to pay any price personally for your involvement in the making of this film and the telling of this story?
Well, if we could talk of prices, I think we could be here for hours explaining all the horrific scenes that happened to me personally, and you know, many people close to Bobby. But I was shot in the face right here. I was shot in the face at close range. Actually, today I live in California now, in Los Angeles. I can't live in Uganda anymore. I had to flee the country. There was attempted kidnaps over my wife. It got to a point that we couldn't live in the country. But you know, I was locked up in jail. We've lost multiple equipment, and you know, we joke about this a lot of times with Chris. It's been one of the most expensive films he's been involved with. You know, had to buy cameras and you know, fix stuff, and you know, yeah, it's violent. It's way more violent than what you see in the film. There's only 1% of the violence in the film, actually. Yeah.
It's really amazing to see the lengths that they went to stop Bobby's campaign, from shutting down the internet to labeling them as insurrectionists, to all the different things that they did. It's really like a textbook example of how people hold on to power. Was that really important to illustrate that to the two of you in this film?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, it was really important. I mean, we knew the result of the election before we shot the first frame. I mean, it's a military dictatorship. Museveni has been in power for 38 years and he's not going anywhere. The elections are just a complete sham. And they sort of initially, he did them sort of to appease the West, to show that it was, you know, it had a semblance of a democracy, but now they still go through the process. But you just literally feel that they just pick a number that Museveni is going to win by. I mean, we did a lot of filming of ballot stuffing. So we had policemen with black bags just stuffing votes in. We had people ticking voting slips with Museveni's name and then wringing their hands, you know, when their hands got tired, and then carry on. we would film in places where there would be thousands of people come out to see BOBI. And then Museveni's representative would go to that same location and no one would go, and Museveni would then get 100% of the votes. We had areas where Museveni would win 100% of the vote, but not the vote of the day, the registered vote. So this would be a registration that was taken 6 months before, and they would say that everyone had turned up to vote, no one had died, no one hadn't voted. So it was farcical. I mean, it was totally farcical. But I think, BOBI knew that was going to happen, but he still played by the rules, and he played by the rules of democracy, and they didn't. And that's why we feel really strongly that it's important that when people see the film, they realize what the regime in Uganda is. And, one of the things we've all struggled with is the fact that this regime is very propped up by the West. The Americans, the Europeans, the British, we all give this regime tons and tons of money under the pretext that it's sort of, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. But it's very depressing for someone like BOBI and all those around him. They go through all of this, they play by the rules. And after the election, everyone came out and said it was fraudulent, it was a farce. But within weeks, people are sort of shaking Museveni's hand again, and it's business as normal. So we're really hoping the film will show the reality of this.
Can you tell us a little bit about Bobby? The way he's portrayed in the film, people all around him are being arrested, killed, attacked. He was, physically hurt. And yet it seems like right after any of these events happen, he just gets right up and goes back out and starts campaigning. He seems remarkably brave. Can you tell us a little bit more about his character and what you?
I'll just say, very quickly, and then I'll let Moses. BOBI and Barbie are African heroes. They are. People say to me, that there must be lots of people like BOBI and Barbie. There's not. They are literally 1 in a billion. They are so resilient, so upbeat, so cheerful, so pleasant, that I've literally never met anyone like them before, and I don't think I'll meet anyone like them again. They gave us total access. They were, BOBI, another thing he said when he saw the film, he said, "You've made it really depressing at the end." And we were like, well, it is depressing, it's super depressing, but he's not that type of person. He always wants to pick people up, and he wants to pick everyone up. I remember I spoke to him just after the election results, and he said, I spoke to him, and then he called me back and he said, "I wanted to pick you up. You sounded depressed." And he was talking to me, and I was like, "BOBI, that's ridiculous." It's but that's what they're like. They're extraordinary people.
Yeah. So BOBI and Bobby and the team, it's on many levels, it's hard to find such individuals, like Chris said. And the driving factor is really the length at which Museveni or his state has entrenched itself in power. And at this point, it's either, we find means and ways to fight, or our children will live under the same kind of dictatorship, or even worse, And we think if Museveni succeeds with his plans, which are to instill his son, who is now a military general as well, into power after him, the situation will get worse than it is today. So it's urgent, as it's urgent to Ugandans for change. It's even more urgent to those who can do something. And many times I would ask BOBI, why are you doing this? You know, do you want to become president? Like, and he's like, man, I'm just tired of this. It's nothing about being in power or anything, in fact, at one point on a trip up here to the US, he was meeting Ugandans in the diaspora. I asked him, so how long will you rule and how will this be? And Bobby said, I would just want to hand the power back to the people. So for him, it's not really about, winning the election or getting into office. Again, a very rare individual, but he wants things to change. He wants to see a different Uganda. Pro people, pro rule of law, respect for human rights and human dignities, and people just to treat each other fairly. The state as it is today, it's more or less a failed state. That's where Uganda is right now. There's been multiple corruption scandals in the parliament. The corrupt officials are only let off. There's no inquiries. Museveni is, everything happens and it starts and ends with him. All state institutions are broken down. It's the rule, it's one man rule, and he's almost, it's not showed, it's not seen, but he rules almost by decree. What he says is the law. Him, his wife, his family, they are the state, they are Uganda. We are all trying to survive within that. So Bobby and his wife, I can't put words to it, because they give up everything they had, and I mean everything. They were comfortable, they were happy, they were okay. And in Uganda, if you're fine, you're wealthy, you can make ends meet, and you're not in politics, you're fine. The moment you say you're against the state, or the moment you involve yourself in politics, things change. You lose everything, including your life is at stake. And it's not just the people on the front line. It's also the fourth estate, like like journalists, people who hold power to account. There's about 2 journalists who have also left Uganda. One is in a refugee camp in Kenya, trying to find his way out of Africa, and another just actually found his way to the US. He's trying to he can't live and work in Uganda anymore. And these were incredible journalists. So it's a very urgent situation, and I hope the world understands that it is an urgent situation. And whatever anybody can do, whatever you can do to change things back in Uganda. And it sounds like, a small thing, but I believe everyone and anybody can do something, whatever small it is, to effect change back home.
Is there any way that this film being out there can have such an impact that it could put pressure on the country in any meaningful way?
Yeah, I think it really can. And that's what we've been, one of my sort of greatest fears was that we would make a film and it wouldn't have an impact. I mean, we've been really fortunate because it was, we're now in partnership with Nat Geo, Disney, and it makes a massive difference having such professional and seasoned professionals working on it. And I think it will make a change because people just aren't aware. And it's politicians can always get away with things when people don't know the truth. They often know you know, the State Department and the British government, they know exactly what's going on. And every year the American government put out a statement on Uganda, and when you read it, it's horrific, you know, what they say. I mean, one of the things that's been happening at the moment is they have these abductions. So anyone associated with BOBI will just be picked up. And some disappear completely, some are tortured, some get found later. But it's just a catalogue of terror. And we just hope that by the general public seeing it, you know, there'll be a shift, and that's what BOBI hopes.
And is there any chance that he will run again in the future, or is it just too dangerous at this point?
It's interesting because I asked him that the other day, and he said there's no point running again if it's under the same rules, because people are going to get killed, people are going to get tortured, abducted, and all the rest of it, and you know the result. So I was at a film festival in Amsterdam with BOBI, and a Chinese gentleman stood up in the audience, and he said, "BOBI, I'm an artist in China, and as you know, we're under incredible it's incredibly difficult for us. Is there any, as a fellow artist, is there any advice you could give me?" And BOBI said, "Man, your problems are worse than mine." And the poor guy looked really worried. And then BOBI said to him, "You know, your state is self-funding, and, you know, they're perfectly capable of funding your oppression. But my state in Uganda is completely funded by external governments. And if that gets turned off, they fail. They can't pay the army, they can't pay the police force, and that's the end of them." So he said, I think our situation is better if we can convince foreign governments to stop funding our oppression, then it can happen.
And you mentioned his music, which I love the way that you used it in the film and had the lyrics. I would assume that this movie is also going to spread his music to audiences that maybe weren't familiar, and that his message will inspire others and help people with other causes around the world. Is that something that's important for him too?
Yeah, super important. I mean, you know, the thing he loves doing is playing music. I mean, that's true to his heart. And, you know, what Moses said, you know, BOBI always says, you know, I want to sort of enact change, and because of the music, I'm the best person to do that. But he said, I'm not a technocrat. I'm not the person to run Uganda, you know, on a long-term basis. What I want to do is be in the studio making music. And I really believe that's where he's happiest.
Well, guys, the film is incredible. I have to say, it looks like a big budget feature at times. I mean, it must have been guerrilla style filmmaking, but some of the shots that you have, particularly at the end when you're zooming out on the village, how did you get those big money looking shots where it looks like a big Hollywood production?
Well, a lot of it was just a lot of footage. But yeah, I mean, we had, there's some lovely shooting in it. And as you see, we had some drone stuff in there as well. But yeah, no.
Yeah, it's a great team that we are and we've been working with. We were very lucky to have incredible producer John Batsek, and very brilliant editor Paul Carlin, very, very brilliant. So really, it's really amazing, and we've been very fortunate with the film, and we are hoping that you know, it goes to lengths, and I'm happy to hear the comment that it looks like a big Hollywood. Hollywood.
Is there any chance that this is going to be turned into a regular Hollywood film, like with actors and such?
It's funny because BOBI said when that whole stuff in Arua, when he's, you know, that he's surrounded in the hotel, and he's then finally sort of, you know, tortured and stuff. He said to me after that, he said, you should make a movie about this. And I said, you know, we should get actors. And I said, we don't need actors, BOBI. We've got the real thing. Yeah, I mean, no one's going to play BOBI better than BOBI. So, yeah. I mean, hopefully this will do it justice.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a couple people here that might want to ask a few questions. If you guys can just hold on a little bit longer. Okay, so.
Film class, thank you. I just wanted to know what his family's like. Kids and everything. How do they function? Do they let them live their lives?
Sorry, it's not very clear. I don't know. The audio is not very clear.
I wanted to know what life was like for his family. The kids, are they left alone? Are they hassled all the time by the government? Can they live their lives?
Would you mind just repeating that for us, Tom, so we could?
They have the microphone. Okay. They were asking what the kids' lives are like now. Are they able to just, live normal lives? Are they left alone?
Well, it's extremely difficult under the circumstances that Bobby lives, him, his wife, and the whole family. I mean, the threat is real. Like right at the beginning of him just getting into parliament, actually a grenade was thrown into his compound, into his son's bedroom, and it just happened that his son was not in the room at the time. So it was a very, I mean, it was a very terrible situation, but, luckily he wasn't there. But there's been very, very, many incidences where, there's people following them at school and, just tabloids writing, coming up with weird stories and like blackmail and all that. So they've not lived normal lives, and Museveni and his regime, they don't have any rules, they've been followed multiple times. And I mean, there's like informers at Bobby's house, like right outside his house. There's like state people there, and you can know, and they're right there, and they show up every day, and they've mounted cameras close to his compound, and like like looking into his compound. And again, but it's I must say, to effect change and to be a vehicle of change, there have to be certain sacrifices. And these are things, being close to Bobby and being working on the film, these are things I noticed, and over time. I mean, starting the film, I was, yes, I was involved. I knew what was happening in the country, but I wasn't political. I didn't vote. I didn't, because I knew it was terrible, and I knew they would, the elections would be rigged and everything. Everyone knows this, but by the end of the film, and observing how much sacrifice Bobby, his wife, his family, his siblings, and have. And because it's not just him, it's everyone around him and the people closest to him, the sacrifices they've taken, I realized how important it was, even just telling the story. It's really, really important that we tell it the best way possible, because these individuals have put their lives on the line, including, those children.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I think one of the things that's made it okay for the children is Barbie. I mean, Barbie is the most extraordinary mother, and she gets that great balance, of creating a wonderful family atmosphere. You know, they all eat together. She's kind of pretty strict. You know, she keeps everyone on the right path. She makes sure they do their homework. So whatever's been going on, she's been just extraordinary. I mean, she's really wonderful.
What is the West thinking they're getting from a corrupt dictatorship in Uganda? Anything specific compared to other dictatorships we give support?
Say it one more time. Say it one more time.
What does the West think they're getting from a corrupt dictatorship in Uganda? Anything different from other nations in Africa or anywhere else? The competition with China, with Russia, diamonds and worldwide.
What is it that we're getting? What is the West or America getting from Uganda that we maybe don't get from other nations?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question. It's a pretty straightforward answer. I mean, there's a couple of things. There's a conflict going on in Somalia, and there's a terrorist group very similar to ISIS called Al-Shabaab. And the African Union, which the Ugandan government contribute I think they have 6,000 troops in Somalia. And that's really doing something that we in the West think is a good idea, keeping Al-Shabaab, you know, under the boot. And then there's some stuff in the Congo. So there's bits of pieces, but, you know, the feeling is that 6,000 troops given to Somalia shouldn't justify the oppression of 44 million people. And it just feels, you know, you can see that it suits the West to have someone like Museveni who will do sort of some of the things we don't want to do ourselves, but it's at such a great cost. It just doesn't add up.
Okay, it's first of all, a spectacular film, and thank you. Two things. One is, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
One is that I'm interested to understand the source of Bobby and Barbie's apparent wealth. I was wondering, given what was described early in the movie about their different backgrounds, if they're partly dependent on her family, or because they clearly live material that they can live well aside from all of the threats and the danger.
Yeah, I heard that. It's a really good question. And we actually, you know, one of the many cuts of the film, we had a little bit of an explanation for that. Bobby was an extremely successful musician. He was, and so the wealth literally comes from that. He was performing, you know, to sell out crowds of 20,000, 30,000 on a monthly basis. And he was doing super well. The moment he went into politics, they stopped him performing, they stopped him being able to play on the radio, so they completely cut off all his income. So yeah, prior to making the sacrifices he made, he was pretty well off. And that's where the sort of nice house and all the rest of it, that's where it came from.
Thank you. And the next thing is really just a comment that if you make future film from the cuts that you have, one request I would make as a person with a sort of standard American ear is I would have appreciated more captions, because I think that there was a significant amount of dialogue, English being spoken by Ugandans, that I actually couldn't fully interpret. And I would have liked to have some additional captions so that I could know every single thing that was being said. Thank you.
Sorry, I
what was
missed that a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, Tom, could you repeat? Yeah.
Some of the English to my ear is it's English that's being spoken by people for whom English is not their primary language, and it's heavily accented. And I would suspect I'm not the only person who couldn't interpret many of the things that were said, and I would have wanted to know what they were saying.
Yeah, I mean, I apologize for that. I mean, yeah, no, I mean, I think what's happened when you're making a film like this, you do tune in. You tune in to what's being said, and as you see, we had sort of moments where we put subtitles, and then there were moments where we thought, you know, maybe wrongly, that everyone would be able to hear it. But I'm sorry to hear that, and yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up.
One more question.
Hi, great job on the film, really appreciate it. My question is about the aid the Western countries give to Uganda. I think that if we were to pull that aid, that the Chinese would just step in and fill the breach and replace that aid and increase their influence. What is there any thought about that? That pulling our aid wouldn't really change things.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a good argument. I don't think that necessarily funding, you know, funding a regime like that on the pretext that just if we don't do it, someone else will. I'm not sure about that at all. I mean, the Chinese operate in a very different way. You know, what they do is they do loans. Like, as an example, they gave loans to build Entebbe Airport, which is the national airport. And there was a big story recently about the Ugandan government not paying the interest due, and the Chinese government said, well, we own the airport. So it's a very different type of arrangement with China. And I just don't think it justifies it doesn't seem right to me. I don't think that's a good argument.
Thank you so much for joining us in the Q&A for the wonderful film, and wish you all the best in the future. Do you have any other plans? Just one more question. For future films, or is it gonna take a little break?
Moses, do you want to?
Sorry, was it that are there future plans for another film, or what's the?
Yeah, do you have any plans in the future for making a sequel or your next project?
So, well, thank you so much. We will, for now, we want to see how this film does, and we're trying to give it its full life and see how far it can get, and, you know, also see the impact that it creates. But yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you a you. Thanks, Stan.
Thanks, guys.
Great.
Thanks,
Hope
Tom.
you can get that to me.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.